FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is June 20th, 2019. Well, we got to start first with what's happening in international geopolitical tensions, and that kind of fits into our next interview for sure. If you hadn't been aware, Iran shot down a drone, a United States drone, in international waters, purportedly, but who knows, but very likely. And this has led to a bit of saber rattling and Trump saying they'll find out how we're going to react, how we're going to exact retribution shortly. Well, that has blasted the price of gold. Right now, the bid is $13.88. It went up to $13.89 before it's blown past that $13.83 resistance point. Silver up 31 cents, $15.44 on the bid. I mean, these are huge moves for metals, for a sector that has been all but given up for dead. And it doesn't matter whether it goes back. I fully anticipate it's going to drop $60 in the next couple of weeks once this gets resolved, one way or the other, short of an all-out war occurring. Just keep an eye on it. And questions or comments, don't forget our Bitcoin contest. You must enter by July 14th. Send an email to kl@kerrylutz.com with your prediction where the price will be on the 20th, right around my birthday, and put in the subject line Bitcoin followed by anything else you want. And the winner will win 40. We're up to 40 pre-1965 U.S. quarters. And that comes out, it's actually gone up a bit since we started the contest. This is a contest that keeps getting better and better. Originally, it was around $100. Now it's around $110 or $15 that you're going to win potentially if you get closest. Don't forget, you have to beat my prediction, which is $66.50. I'm sticking to it. I won't change it. But just remember, enter by July 14th. kl@kerrylutz.com is the email address. Each follow-up runner-up, the first 5 will each get a one pre-1965 25-cent piece, which is getting upwards of close to $3. Not a bad deal. Anyways, well, tensions are flaring up. There's a problem that has really been skipped over by the U.S. media that you need to know about. Our staunchest ally, the bastion of democracy, whatever that means, but certainly a keeper and preserver of Western civilization. I'm talking about Israel, has a political crisis unfolding now, which until I started boning up on our next guest, Michael Friedson, I really wasn't aware of. And Michael's a long-term journalist and the Media Alliance highly acclaimed daily news correspondent. Michael, welcome to the show. So interesting times in the Holy Land, huh?
Always. It's been there a long time, and I don't think the interest has ever waned, and it's just it's an exciting place to be. If you get the Chinese curse version of exciting sometimes, but it's certainly a trip living there.
Yeah, well, hey, no group of people has done more with a bad hand in terms of you're in the middle of the desert, you have shortages of water. Up until recently, energy dependent upon the very people that want to destroy you. You've got enemies. You're surrounded by enemies. Probably more adverse conditions than in Hong Kong, and yet Israel manages to not just survive, but really to build for the future, even though the future is always uncertain. Living under that constant threat, how does it change you?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. It's a good question. We speak to a lot of groups. Let me just back up so I explain that we're an American news agency. Mm-hmm. We're based here in the Middle East. We're sort of like a boutique agency that specializes in one product, the Middle East. We have writers all over the Middle East. Our primary bureau here in the Middle East is in Jerusalem, but we from there go place to place, cover everything. We have writers all over. So that's our beat. To explain what it's like to live here, it's kind of amazing. It's a very intimate life, very accessible for people in our business. We interact with just about anybody who's anybody. We spend a lot of time in the Palestinian areas, and one of the things we do is we bring groups that want to interface with all of the players in the play over here that feel it's disingenuous to go back to America without even meeting some Palestinians. Since Israeli citizens can't do it as an American journalistic entity, we can go into the Palestinian areas and we set up programs and we introduce visiting groups to speakers and all. And it keeps us on an even keel. It gives us the insight into everybody's situation. And as a news agency, which we do everything journalistically, so the whole idea is not that we focus on lack of bias, but we talk about completeness of our stories. So whether we're writing it on paper or electronically, or filming it, or doing an audio segment, or taking a group somewhere, we're setting up whatever we do based on the basic principle that every narrative appropriate to a story must be told, and told completely. And if you can accomplish that, we feel that that is as close to unbiased and perfection as you can get in the human realm. Yeah. That's where we come from. And I have to tell you, when we do bring groups in, it's interesting. First of all, we always ask our groups, for a quick show of hands here, did anybody get on the plane without having received at least one phone call from somebody who loves you telling you not to go? And I have to tell you, I've never encountered a group without hands going up.
Yeah. Well, here's a good thing. When I decide to go, I'll just ignore everybody like I always do my own thing.
That's the best way to go. It is amazing. There's 150,000 missiles in southern Lebanon pointed right into the gut of the state of Israel. There's a whole bunch of hundreds or thousands of missiles in the Hamas hands in the Gaza Strip area, also pointed at the country. And once you're in it, you don't feel it. It's just a remarkable disconnect. But it's no matter what I say, it doesn't really mean anything until you get on a plane and get off the plane over here and see what I'm talking about. But it's truly an amazing place to be. The Middle East is just fascinating.
The very definition of faith. So, got a problem here. Netanyahu was indicted. He won an electoral victory while facing indictment, while under indictment. And that means that he can't be prosecuted while he's sitting prime minister, evidently, from my understanding. And if I'm wrong, correct me. And now he's had an impasse at forming a new government because Israel has a parliamentary form of government. And effectively, the ruling party picks their prime minister, and you've got to get a certain number of votes in the Knesset. And if you don't get that, then you have to go back and go through the whole voting process again. Did I get that right?
Well, a couple of holes in it, but not too bad. It's a House legislature called the Knesset, the Parliament of the Knesset, and it has 120 seats. And in order to become the prime minister, you don't run on the ballot under the line that says prime minister. You have to be the head of a party. But don't worry about that. There's a party for everybody. In the last election, there were more than 30 that ran. So don't let that put you off. You want to come here and start your party and run, sure, go ahead and do it. But the prime minister is going to be the head of the party that won the greatest number of seats in the election. So it's proportional representation. If I get 50% of the vote, I get 50% of the seats. If I get 30%, then 30%, and it goes down and up and whatever. So in the last election, well, there's another part to it too, which is key to this election. Not only does you have to be the head of the party that gets the greatest number of seats, but in his judgment, the president, which is largely a ceremonial position, but in this case, he's got to work. The president has to believe, in his estimation, that if he gives you the mandate to form the government, that you can actually do it, that you can get fined, steal, borrow, bribe, somehow get 61 elected seats in the Knesset to be part of your coalition, and therefore you can go on and govern. In this, the society is very negotiation oriented. So, for instance, every fall, just before school begins, the headlines read "school strike pending," and there always is a school strike pending. But miraculously, at the 11th hour, somewhere around midnight, the night before school is scheduled to open, they reach an agreement, and life goes on. When elections come, what the public doesn't really see, unless they're looking for it, is the real grit that goes with old-fashioned horse trading. And Netanyahu's party won 35 seats, and their largest opponent won 35 seats. But the president ran the numbers, because each party has to say to the president who they would like to get the mandate to form the government. And based on those recommendations, the president determined that there's no way that Netanyahu's opposition would be able to get more than 55 seats. He was clocking in at around 62 to 65 seats, so it was a no-brainer. Benjamin Netanyahu, here's the baton. Go form your government. You have 45 days to do it. And we expect to have a lot of drama the last couple of days, but when the clock hits 12 on the night of the 45th day, you're going to have an agreement. Didn't happen. Mm-hmm. The guy named Avigdor Lieberman, who was an immigrant from Moldova during the time of the Soviet Union, and whose first job here in Israel was to be the bureau chief for a guy named Benjamin Netanyahu. They've had a love-hate affair all these years since. He didn't follow the script. He never blinked. The two of them, he is the head of a party that lost a lot of strength in the last few elections. But imagine a party of only 5 seats holding hostage not only the party of 35 seats of the prime minister, but in fact the whole country. Because with Avigdor Lieberman not blinking and the two of them not coming to an agreement, the president said, it's a dead heat. It's like a judge and a hung jury says you're going to have we'll declare it a mistrial, and you're going to have to retry the case. The first time in the history of the state of Israel, there was what's called a snap election. So the election is going to be rerun on September 17th, and the question is, will Prime Minister Netanyahu be able to maintain his ability to get the most number of seats, number one, and then be able to form a coalition? Mm-hmm. And that's the story of the hour.
Interesting. Kind of like the Supreme Court of the United States. You got 9 votes, and up until recent appointments, the vote was split pretty much 4-4, and then one justice, Anthony Kennedy, was the swing vote, and he determined where the court was heading at any given time. Now things have changed a bit and probably will change further, but exactly the same thing. It's kind of like the inmates running the asylum. You can't allow them. You want to protect minorities, but you can't allow them to control and subvert the process for their own benefit. In the United States, I believe our problem here, Michael, is that we have only 2 political parties, and they're both completely corrupt. In Israel, everybody gets a party. In fact, I guess you're kind of on the outs socially if you don't have your own political party. And
absolutely.
And then you have a potential for chaos. And like you said, up until this point, it's always resolved itself, and probably for the better, because then, you don't just have one party with its overarching ideology that much of the country might not buy into. But the danger is that you reach an impasse and that you have gridlock and no agreement can be reached. So do you think that in this election that the citizens of Israel will take a look at what happened and say, we can't allow this to happen again, and line up firmly behind Netanyahu? Or will they view him as a weak incumbent lame duck with sharks circling and blood in the water.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
In the last election, our agency was the only one that called it really dead on, and perhaps for reasons that were not recognizable to the masses, although it was right in front of their nose. When you do polling, especially here in the Middle East, there are two questions that are always asked. First question is the one that everybody puts their money on, and it's completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The first question, of course, is who you're going to vote for. Well, everybody lies. You're not going to get an answer. And in the Middle East, in the DNA, there's a fear of officialdom knowing too much about you. So particularly, you're going to lie. You have to lie. But the second part of the poll is, who do you feel is most appropriate to have their finger on the button? Now, who's the guy that's going to lead us if those 150,000 missiles up north start firing in our direction? And people, no matter where they are, if they're voting in a democratic election, they're going to vote health and wealth.
Yes.
And health and wealth in the state of Israel translates to, am I going to be spending an inordinate amount of time in our mandatory shelter room in our apartment or our house? Or are we going to take time off from work to go to another war? Don't forget, there's conscription. Every man and woman at age 18 goes into the Army. They serve until they're in reserve duty until their mid-40s. It affects everybody. The whole idea of going to war or defense issues, you're arguing with people that have been through the Army, so they feel that they know more than anybody else. Anyhow, it comes down to health and wealth. And we said, look at it. When people get into the privacy of the voting booth, they're going to vote health and wealth. That means they're going to vote Netanyahu because there's no successors here. When people ask us, is usually one of the first questions we're asked is, who's going to replace Netanyahu? Who comes next? There really isn't anybody next. My own opinion is that it's a Middle Eastern thing. In America, we've got, you want to be a politician? There's a farm system.
Yeah, the bench.
Start local, county, state. You work your way up. You want to be a professional politician? You can be. Even if you're a lousy one, you can still be a professional one. In Israel, they're driving a tractor. They're running a supermarket. Whatever their profession is, they pay dues to join a political party. The stalwarts work their way up in the hierarchy of the party, and then a list is put together of the 120 names in descending order based on how the leadership of the party is put together and who makes these decisions. But the list, like the first, if you have a party that always gets at least 10 seats, the first 10 seats are in. If a party usually gets 10 seats and you're given number 30 on the list, even if your party wins, you're not going to get the seat.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all come down to. So, Netanyahu is potentially in trouble because there are indictments, not yet against him, but the prosecutors have announced that they, as a result of the investigations, have determined that there should be indictments issued against Netanyahu. The question remains is, can he serve if he's under indictment but not convicted? And that's going to be played out if the situation arises. But having said that, I still contend that there is a lack of at least a generation of leadership, because in the Middle East, the belief is that the successor is not somebody you mentor. The successor is the person who's going to knock you off. So you keep the arm's length.
It's like the mafia.
Keep your enemies close and your friends closer.
Hey,
and in doing so, you just don't have the farm team to draw from. You don't have the pros to draw from.
It's a fascinating.
So that's where we are.
fascinating conundrum that you're in. I think right now we've had recent attacks. We don't know exactly who did it. It's a he said, she said type situation on shipping in the Straits of Hormuz. Today or yesterday, we had Iran shoot down a drone, a U.S. drone, purportedly in international waters. You got to take all this with a grain because we don't want another Gulf of Tonkin incident. But those factors ratcheting up, if they start shooting some missiles back towards Israel, probably is going to push Netanyahu over the finish line, isn't it?
I think that I'm not suggesting he's doing it for that reason.
No, not at all.
But I honestly believe, from being here over 20 years, I think that given the fervor of the reporting and the level of the arguments and street corner debates about what's going to be vis-a-vis Iran, and what's really new in the country, there's very little new in the Middle East. People don't wear wristwatches; they wear calendars on the wrist. And based on what people are seeing now, the times they are changing, and the alliances in the Gulf are changing, and Israel is now being invited to take a seat at the table, not because anybody lit a campfire and sang Kumbaya and danced around the flames, but because the predominantly Sunni Arab countries have made a personal, internal determination that there's going to be a war at some point with Iran, and rather than shill for the Palestinians, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, I just mean that that issue, they're willing to back off and take Israel in, not as an ally, but at least somebody they can cooperate with, rather than take the Palestinian line of we're not going to talk to anything that has to do with Israel, because those countries want the military prowess of Israel fighting side by side with them when the big one comes. That's how they're thinking.
Yeah.
The things are changing.
Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And that's
classic. The most important lesson you can come to this region with. It's not just an adage, but it honestly determines every political move made over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally get that. And they might not love Israel, but Israel's got nukes, and Israel has the strongest military in the Middle East. And if it's inevitable that there's going to be a war, then you want Israel on your side, or at least not fighting against you, but behind the scenes giving you logistics, because Israel has the best logistics, best intelligence of any government in the Mideast. You want them to perhaps covertly being resupplying you, whether it's through the U.S. or however it works, and basically, effectively, it cements the tie with the United States as well. So Jared Kushner, I don't know what to make of him. I'm not bowled over by him, but he certainly is a genuine lover of Israel, genuine friend. What is the perception of Kushner in the country there?
It's mixed like anything else. Don't forget that Israel has an inordinate amount of expats from the United States who actually vote or registered to vote and vote,
Correct.
Particularly in the presidential elections. So we got about 300,000 votes that are cast in any presidential election in the United States, and they follow party line. Unlike in the American pro-Israel world and the political Jewish world, it's overwhelmingly support for Democrats over Republicans by about 80% to 20%.
Yeah, when will we learn?
That's the same. If you flip it over,
when will we
the
learn?
Same proportion.
Yeah. So
the people that scoff at Jared Kushner because he's the son-in-law of the president, or pick on him in any way, pretty much follow the party line accordingly. I don't believe that he's dazzled anybody who isn't already interested in supporting him, but he hasn't really done any particular damage either. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of confidence in their plan, but part of the reason for that is that the plan just hasn't been able to get a life and get out. And right now it's in really dire straits because the elections in America are going to come before the plan, or too soon after the plan is released, if it gets released at all before that. And that's pretty much quashing any chance. So most people here feel that it's nice. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the largesse we received from the Americans, the recognition of Jerusalem as its capital, the recognition of sovereignty over the Golan Heights, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Let's focus on those cool things. And they should have just held off until the second term if there's going to be one. So they'll probably just keep tap dancing until then.
Yeah, well, my guess is Trump is going to win a second term. I was one of 24 pundits. I don't consider myself a pundit. Don't get that wrong. But I was one of 24 media personalities of all stripes who predicted his victory back in July of 2015. And it's my guess that it's going to be repeated, but hey, we'll see about that. Hey, so if we want to check out your work, Michael, where do we go to find your commentary and all the articles that you guys are producing?
Well, I got two things for you. First of all, we just released about a month ago a dynamite new website we're really proud of. And it's just a gorgeous site. You get it by going to The Media Line, is all one word, but don't forget themedialine.org, and you'll get a little pop-up for a thing called the Mideast Daily News. That's something I've been writing for about 20 years now. It's a daily shot of news from the Middle East, not just Israel, not just the Palestinians, but the whole Middle East, but only like 4 items, about 650 words. We call it news for people with a life. People that want to know what's happening in the region, but don't want to spend a day with a pedantic, redundant, an exhibition of somebody who wants to show that he can cut and paste other people's news articles. We keep it simple. It's a big hit on Capitol Hill because it's trusted. The elected officials who stand to lose their careers if they come up with something stupid and inaccurate rely on it because it's considered what they call clean. And we're very, very proud of it. So go to the website, and if you want to sign up for the daily, we work very hard to keep that cost-free. We don't want to charge anybody for it, and we want to spread it around as much as we can. It's non-political. We're totally independent. We're not tied to any party, and
all right,
we're just like we're the final bastion of old-fashioned good journalism.
I love it, and that's what we need more of, for sure. We don't get enough. I just subscribe to that your august publication myself, and I'm looking forward to getting those daily updates. I am one of those people with no life, not really, but a limited life, put it that way. So I'm a news junkie. I follow everything, but try to follow it from an apolitical standpoint. We will have a link to themedialine.org in the show notes to this interview on Financial Survival Network. Don't forget, join our contest. Last entry due, latest entry, July 14th. Price of Bitcoin on the 20th, right around my birthday. You got to beat me. My guess is 6650. Just email it to kl@kerrylutz.com. Make sure you put Bitcoin in the subject line. Grand prize, 40 pre-1965 quarters, which are going up in value multiple percent per day as we speak. Today, it's up 3% already. And runner-up prizes, next 5 people each get 1 pre-1965 quarter. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us and educating us about various things that I personally knew nothing about Israel, and I do follow a lot of news on it. And we'll look forward to having you back on.
Pleasure to be with you. Truly enjoyed it, and I'd love to come back whenever you invite me.